Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Jack's Corner. I'm Tarzan Bonanno, and here again with Jack Figgle. So, Jack, today we're going to be talking about the beginnings of the Orientale Lumen conference. So, how'd you get into this? Where'd this begin?
Morning, Tarzan. Well, this is perhaps one of the more interesting stories of my life, of how I got into all this back in the 90s. I started publishing books by then, and in 1996, I went to Rome for the celebration of the anniversary of the Union of Ujjain, which is the celebration of the creation of the Ruthenian Catholic Church from 1646. And this was 1996. It was the 350th anniversary. And they were having a big event in Rome because it was the first time since the fall of communism that the Ruthenian bishops of Europe could travel, come from the underground church, and that the bishops from America could also come, of course, to Rome and meet them as a group. So everyone was gathering for this big celebration that was going to take place in St. Peter's Basilica, with Pope John Paul II presiding over a Byzantine liturgy at the main altar of St. Peter's Basilica.
Did he know how to do the Divine Liturgy?
He was only presiding. He only sat in the chair off to the side. He did not concelebrate.
Okay. I ask because I know Pope Francis is able to do the Divine Liturgy.
Right, because he grew up with it down in Brazil.
Argentina.
Yeah. And he's good friends with who is now Archbishop Patriarch Sviatoslav, because before Sviatoslav became the major archbishop of the Ukrainian Catholic Church, he was bishop in Buenos Aires. So they knew each other from their previous lives, if you will.
Yeah.
So in 1996, there was going to be this big, huge gathering, and I wanted to be there. So I flew over. I think in 96, I was living in Houston. No, Matt was living here. Yeah, I moved back. So I was here in Virginia, and I flew over to London, and there was a couple of liturgies in different other basilicas with bishops, but the big one, of course, was in the Basilica. John Paul had just broken his hip about a couple of months before, and so he came in a big, elaborate chair on wheels and only stayed up through the readings. He didn't stay long. He gave a speech, and the main celebrant was Archbishop Judson Protzig of Pittsburgh.
Wait, so he did the homily, or he just spoke after?
Yeah, the Pope did the homily in English. Or no, well, I don't remember if it was in English or Italian, but anyway, the Pope gave the homily.
Yeah. So he exercised his pastoral prerogative. That's
right. And of course, the idea was to have this celebration in his presence so that he could give the blessing. And, it was all part of the union of all of these Ruthenian Catholic bishops with the Bishop of Rome. And that's why they suffered the persecution and were martyred and so forth and so on. So, and this is the first time since the fall of communism, which meant it was the first time perhaps in hundreds of years, or at least 100 years, that this was taking place. So that all happened, and my flights to come back came through London. And because of the timing and everything, I had a stopover in London overnight. I couldn't seem to get a flight that would get me to London in time to get a flight to America, out of Rome. And so I had to stay overnight, which suited me just fine, because I made arrangements to go visit two of my friends that I was working with on the book business that were living in Oxford. So from Heathrow Airport, I rented a car, drove up to Oxford, and invited them out for dinner. I stayed overnight at a hotel someplace, and then went back to Heathrow the next day to fly home.
Please tell me you went to the bar that Tolkien and Lewis would sit at and write books.
Oh, I don't know. Could have been.
Well, I mean, they have a plaque, and wherever it is, they have a plaque that, like, the Inklings sat here.
Okay.
Just like in Lewis's old parish, it says, this is the spot where he was inspired to write Screwtape Letters. But anyways.
So, and for this dinner also, because I knew he was there and I'd met him previously in the States at the Kievan Church Study Group, we invited Metropolitan, then Bishop Kallistos, to join us for dinner. So it was the four of us having dinner, and one of the topics of conversation was the Kievan Church Study Group, which had been meeting for a few years, and it was Ukrainian Catholics, Ukrainian Orthodox in the diaspora outside of Ukraine, with Kallistos, talking, having an academic discussion about how the Church of Kiev was really never part of the split between Rome and Constantinople of 1054. And some of the Ukrainian Catholics were saying that the Union of Brest that brought them back into union with Rome was really just recognized a union that existed and was never broken. So they were promoting this idea that the Church of Kiev should just simply recognize that they never broke communion, and therefore they should share communion immediately. That wasn't going to happen, but that was the idea behind that group. Well, Kallistos was sort of the in-between person, since he was neither Catholic nor Ukrainian Orthodox, and he was the odd man out. But he attended those meetings because he brought a lot of academic credibility to what they were doing. So that's how I met Kallistos a few years before, and so we invited him for dinners. So as we were talking about the Kievan Study Group, I explained to His Grace that I was impressed with how interesting it was to learn about the Church of Kiev and so forth, and how wonderful these encounters were that the study group had created. And I said, I would like to sponsor a similar ecumenical event as the publisher of Eastern Churches Journal. We'd been publishing 3 or 4 years by then, and invite all Eastern Catholics and all Eastern Orthodox churches to come together and talk about what were the issues that kept us apart and how could we bring things back together. So it's going to be a grassroots, laity-driven type of activity. And Bishop Kallistos thought it was a tremendous idea. He said, to have unity, we have to have unity at the grassroots level. We have to get people in the pew and diocesan clergy to get to know each other, start to understand each other, and have ecumenical friendship, in addition to the high-level theological discussion that was going on. So I said, well, I'd like to organize and host this kind of a conference, and would you come and be our keynote speaker? And he said yes. And I was flabbergasted, someone with Kallistos' stature saying yes to me. He barely knew me, but he liked the idea very much. And so
you're just like a low-level person in somewhere in Virginia. He doesn't know, and he's just like, you know what? Sure, let's do this.
Yeah. And, I had no theological background. I was little old Jackie Fiegel from Duquesne, Pennsylvania. I grew up Ruthenian my whole life. And, I just got this idea. And so I, as my mother would say, I was not one to hold back speaking my mind. So he got his diary out that he carried with him, little pocketbook. And we discussed dates for the next year and settled on the 3rd week of June, because it would be after the academic year in most parts of the world would be over, and that college professors could come as speakers, college students and faculty could come as participants. Other lay people could take their vacation because we concluded also that we wanted to have it on weekdays, not a weekend, so that we could get clergy involved. We knew clergy were, not available at all on weekends because they were all involved with their parishes.
All having divine liturgy.
Yeah, right. So we settled on the third week of June, picked the dates. He wrote them down in his diary, and that's how the first Orientale Lumen conference got planned and scheduled right then and there at dinner in Oxford.
And I'm assuming the first one was in Oxford.
No, the first one was in Washington, D.C.
So they all just he came to America for this concert.
Came to America. Yeah. The idea was that this was gonna be mostly American lay people and clergy. The international dialogue was taking place in Rome and other parts of the world. This was going to be an American phenomenon, if you will, or at least the first one was planned to be in Washington, D.C. And my other desire was if we had it in Washington, then people might come and spend a couple of days before or after going sightseeing. And so Washington had a lot of attractions in terms of, getting people to come and take a vacation, get to see all the tourist places of Washington, and that's how we started the first one. And then, so that was all agreed. We agreed that the topic would be the document Orientale Lumen itself. That's where we got the name.
Yeah,
and it's kind of stuck ever since.
It's fair.
That was the document. And we also sort of planned that we would have 6 plenary speakers, 2 Eastern Catholic, 2 Eastern Orthodox, and 2 Roman Catholics. So we would spread it around and try to have as much of a balance as we could, and try to have one speaker that was very academic and one speaker that was more pastoral. And we've kept that principle ever since. This last year was the 27th conference. So for 27 years, we've been trying to use a similar model, although we've tweaked it now and then, especially with COVID, to go virtual. But that's how the first one got started.
So what you're saying is we just need an Eastern Orthodox in this chat, right? Because you got the Eastern Catholic, I got the Latin Catholic. Where's the Orthodox?
That's right. That's right. If we wanted to expand this little Jack's Corner discussion, we could invite an Eastern Orthodox to join us. And then we have the same balance that we have at the conference. So, yeah, we can pursue that after today's talk and see if we can come up with something.
Definitely. So, you had the first live one in Washington, D.C. What was the outcome? How did it go? And what happened from there?
Okay. Well, it almost didn't happen.
Oh.
Not too many people know about this, but now your audience is going to learn about it for the first time. Around March so that was 1996, so we scheduled it June of 97. In March of 97, I was over in England on some other business. I went up to visit my friend in Oxford, and I called Callistos on the phone to just go over things and see if he'd gotten his tickets for June and all that sort of thing. And he sounded sort of, very quiet on the phone. And he said, "Oh, Mr. Figo, I'm so very sorry. I've had a really bad winter health-wise. I've had a couple of bouts with the flu. I have a cold right now. I just don't think I could get into one of those small seats in the back of the plane and fly to Washington, in June. I'm afraid I'm going to have to cancel." Well, I'm in a panic because I built the whole agenda around him coming and his name, and had these other speakers, and I was getting ready to announce things. And so I said to him, "Well, Your Grace, if we were to pay for a business ticket for you to come rather than just the coach ticket. Would that make a difference? And he paused and he said, oh, yes, that would be very nice. He was used to flying coach everywhere because he was a monk, and
didn't have the money.
Yeah, he didn't have the money, or the people who were sponsoring him for these trips didn't have the money. He flew a lot himself to Greece and to Patmos, his monastery, where he was officially a monk of the monastery of St. John the Evangelist on Patmos. So
good place to have it.
When I offered him a business ticket, he then changed his mind and said, "Oh, I think perhaps I could manage coming on the plane if it was in a coach, nice comfortable seat." So I did some research while I was still there, because I had to buy the ticket to come from England to America. And back in the 90s, was before the days of doing it online. You had to call up airlines and do it over the phone. And I checked around a few airlines that flew from London to Washington nonstop. And one of them that had just started up was Virgin Atlantic. And their, what they call upper class, which is their business class, was cheaper than anybody else. So being on a tight budget, I booked him a ticket on Virgin Atlantic, and it also had a few other perks. One was they provided transportation from your home to the airport in England, and then from the airport to whatever site you wanted to go to in Washington by way of, a driven limousine.
So you're really giving Callistos the royal treatment. It's not how he doesn't have to drive. He didn't have to pay.
When he got to the airport, Virgin Atlantic upper class had its own special line and its own special lounge. He didn't have to go through all of the security and all the lines, because the driver and the car took him right to where Virgin Atlantic had their upper class gate and door to get in. And he was treated like royalty all the way onto the plane, and had this sumptuous meal and so forth. And when he arrived in Washington, I didn't have to worry about getting him from Dulles Airport to the conference. They brought him by limo. We had a suite, a 2-room arrangement for him at the conference site where we were meeting. And so anyway, he got royal treatment. Well, when he landed a day or two after, he and I were at a meal, and I asked him, "Well, Your Grace, how was the flight?" "Oh, it was very nice." And they, he said, "I was so early to the airport because I didn't have to wait in line. Usually I have to get there 3 hours ahead. By bus." He went by bus from Oxford to the airport when he would travel. And he said, but he said on the plane, there was an extra amenity that he did not take advantage of, or he used the term, he did not avail himself of. And that was, they had an onboard masseuse.
That's funny, but what? This was business class. What business class?
Well, they called it upper class. He said that they had a masseuse on board the plane, that if you wanted to get a massage while you were in the air, you could go in some room and have a massage. And he said he did not avail himself of that extra service.
Yeah, well, I feel like that. It feels awkward for me to think about it. I can't imagine for a monk.
Right, exactly.
Like, don't touch me.
I don't know if they still do that or not, but back then they did, and that was kind of humorous to me that he even had to consider it and had to say no. So anyway,
did you know?
I did not know.
You're just like, oh, by the way, whatever you got me was way too much.
So that's how the first Orientale Lumen conference almost never happened. If he had canceled, we wouldn't have got anywhere. So the results were that we did have 100 people show up. sort of out of the blue. I just put the word out to my subscribers to Eastern Churches Journal. I sent out flyers and brochures to the mailing list of all the Eastern Catholic and Eastern Orthodox parishes in the country, asking the pastor to make it known to their parishioners in their bulletins. I sent press releases to all the Eastern Christian newspapers, Catholic and Orthodox. And when I came back, after I got Callistos to agree, I went to see the dean of the School of Religious Studies at Catholic University to ask if he would be willing to co-sponsor the conference, give it a little more academic, justification and flair. But the real reason was I found out that if it was a university-sponsored event, the cost of overnight accommodations, meals, and a meeting room at the university campus would be half price.
Anything for a deal.
And that's how I was able to keep the cost of that first conference to something like $200 for 4 days.
Yeah, things were cheaper.
But the downside of it was the overnight accommodations was a dormitory room with mattresses only so thin and, no amenities. It was a cafeteria food. So it was on the cheap, but because of the low cost, we got 100 people to come from all over the country. Not many were local from Washington. Most of them came in from, all over. And also, one of the other reasons for picking Washington was it was relatively close to all the concentration of Eastern Christian churches from Ohio through Pennsylvania to New Jersey, sort of the whole Eastern Christian, Eastern Catholic, Eastern Orthodox belt of parishes where all the immigrants settled. And so all of those places were driving distance to Washington, which I thought would be attractive rather than everyone having to fly. But we did have people, come from California, from the Michigan area, Chicago, and so forth. The speakers we lined up, besides Callistos, did meet my criteria of 2, 2, and 2. So we had Callistos and Father John Erickson when he was still a layman, before he was dean at St. Vladimir's. He was the other Orthodox speakers. I got 2 Eastern Catholic bishops to come, Bishop Nicholas Samra of the Melkites, who just retired last year, and Bishop Basil Lawston of the Ukrainians, who retired some years ago. They're both still with us. And then on the Roman Catholic side, I got Monsignor Kevin Irwin, who is a professor at Catholic University and a well-known liturgist, and a monk, I think of the Salesians or someone from up in Connecticut, because one of the subtopics of Orientale Lumen was monasticism. So I thought it would be good to have a Roman Catholic monk come and talk about, Eastern monasticism from his perspective. And then, of course, Kevin Irwin came to talk about liturgy. And I'd had him as a professor a few years before when I was studying part-time at Catholic University. And so he was a friend of mine, and he was willing to come and be a speaker. So those were the 6 speakers we had.
So correct me if I'm wrong here. There were 2 monks, 2 laymen, 2 bishops?
Yep. So we had the Holy Spirit arranged for a whole mixture of different kinds of folks from a wide variety of backgrounds. And it made for a very, very good agenda. The first conference, we did we would have the plenary speech, and then we would break up into discussion groups. And I asked friends of mine to be the discussion group leaders. So I picked 4 people. We broke the 100 people up into 25. And we never did that again, because this was the first time Eastern Orthodox and Eastern Catholics really had ever met before. This was, pretty groundbreaking ecumenical experience. 1 or 2 of those discussion groups did not go well.
It became hostile.
Yeah, one became hostile and one became so emotional that people came out in tears. And I don't remember whether it was tears of joy or tears of sadness, but anyway, we never did that again. Breaking up into groups. The other complaint that I got on the evaluation forums afterward was that people wanted to hear everything that everyone was saying, and they weren't able to do that when there was another discussion group going on someplace else. So then from then on, we would have a plenary lecture, and then we'd have a Q&A discussion immediately after each lecture about that presentation. And then we'd have a panel with all the speakers. And so we tweaked the agenda a little bit, but we still follow pretty much the same format.
Yeah, I can see how a small group doesn't really work in this context. You know, it works for parishes, small groups having people, but not in a conference.
Especially a conference where nobody knew each other.
Mm-hmm.
It was the first time the Eastern Catholic bishops had a chance to meet any Eastern Orthodox, like Callistos.
Mm-hmm. Then you have different temperaments, you have different vices and all that stuff, and they all just kind of get together. And I mean, this is a hot button topic, a hot button issue, having unity again. Everybody has their own opinion on how it should look, and so I could see how it could get hostile very quickly if not taken very carefully. But we did succeed, and one success came out in the closing session, in that a representative of the Greek Orthodox Archbishop of New York came to the conference and was just a participant. He didn't have any official role, but I felt that since he had made the effort, and he did tell me he had a letter of greeting from the Archbishop, that I should recognize him and let him, have a few words. And so at the end of the conference, at the closing session, I invited him as Archimandrite Eugene Pappas, I think was his name. And he and I have kept being good friends. Pappas, Pappas. Okay.
He's now the pastor. I think it's Three Hierarchs Greek Orthodox Church in Brooklyn. They're now a bulletin customer of mine. Mm-hmm. And we've kept in touch all these years, and he's a good friend. But at that closing session, he got up and he read the letter from the Archbishop, but then concluded with his own observation. And it was very, very telling what he said, and it made me really kind of feel good. He said, I've never had the opportunity to meet very many Eastern Catholics, but we Orthodox have heard about these so-called uniates, our whole life. And that we've been told that they walk like us, they talk like us, they eat like us, they pray like us, they even smell like us. But they're not us. They're not Orthodox. But now that I've met them, especially the two bishops that are here, Bishop Nicholas and Bishop Basil, he said, and I've had the chance to talk with them and meet them, and I've never ever met an Eastern Catholic myself in my whole life, but I've heard about them. But now I found that, yes, indeed, they do walk like us and talk like us and pray like us and eat like us, and they do smell like us because they use incense like we do. But they are a whole lot more like us than I thought they were. And I'm so glad that I've met them, because now I understand who they are a whole lot better, and how and why we should be back together as a united church. So we even with that one little conversion of his attitude towards the Eastern Catholics, we had a success. And we've been doing that sort of thing for 25 years ever since. The same sort of interactions occur, and people get to learn and know each other. And as Metropolitan Callistos has said many, many times over and over, that he very much appreciates his ecumenical friendships. with the Eastern Catholics that he's met through the Orientale Lumen conferences.
It's beautiful.
So we've accomplished quite a bit. We've had hundreds of speakers. We've averaged, I think, over the 25 years, 100 is about the average. We peaked just before 9/11 at 175 people for the conference. But then after 9/11, everyone was afraid to travel and get on an airplane. But we persevered, and even the June after the September attack of 9/11, we still had a conference that year. Everyone was advising me that I should cancel, and every conferences all over the country were being canceled. And I said, no, that's what the terrorists want us to do. Stop living our lives. I said, we're going to do this no matter how many people show up. And we did. We had 50, but then the next year we had 60 and then 70. And we built back up to about 100. And that's sort of been like steady state 100. During the pandemic, we had 100 online the first year after, but even the online has now dropped down to about 50 this past June. So I'm hoping next June, the pandemic will be long behind us and everyone will be anxious to get back together in person.
And hopefully the work we're doing with the podcasts and just more content in general with God With Us, that more people will be involved. That it won't cap at 100, but go back to 170 or beyond.
Yeah, well, that would be great. It would be a nice problem to have, because the facility that we would, reserve in advance can only handle about 100 for meals, and they only have 48 overnight beds. So if we did get 100 with a lot of people from out of town, I'd have the nice problem of having to scramble to get, additional facilities. I did do that for a few years, where I had to get a hotel close to the university with rooms booked and put the latecomers, off campus.
I think the first thing we do is we get Virgin Atlantic and Virgin Airlines to sponsor for how they treated Metropolitan Callistos. Hey, will you sponsor us because you treated him like a king back in 95? That's the first step.
So that was the first conference, and we've persevered to have one every year in Washington since. Then after about 6 or 7 years, I thought, well, one way to expand and make this sort of available to more people would be to have a second one on the West Coast.
So two going at the same time, or just one at the other?
Yeah, one after the other, because I wanted to use the same theme. I felt like I couldn't be in two places at once, and it was important for me to be at both. Because the people in California came because they got to know me or they heard of it, and so I felt that continuity was important. And so I coordinated with people that had come from California to find a venue and get speakers either local to the West Coast or speakers who are willing to travel for back-to-back conferences. And we had a mixture of both. Sometimes we would have speakers that were in the West participate, and other speakers would be at both of them back-to-back weeks. One year, after a couple of years in California, I thought I would try even further. And for 2 years, we had 3 conferences back-to-back. Washington, San Diego, and 1 year we did Detroit, and another year we did outside New York City at Seton Hall University.
How did it end up going across the pond? Because I know it was mentioned that it happened.
Yeah, well, I can't remember who came up with the idea. Perhaps I did, someone else. But we started with what we called Euro East, where Archbishop Vsevolod of blessed memory, sort of one of the founders along with Kallistos, he was the one helping me get Orthodox participation. And he said, Mr. Figo, we should go have one in Istanbul, in Constantinople. And we will get Patriarch Bartholomew to come and at least welcome us and greet us, and we could have an audience with him, and we can pray in churches there that are still functioning, and we could do some sightseeing. So it was very attractive to have something in Constantinople. And then likewise, there was, because Kallistos was from England, and he was involved with ecumenical activities that were going on there, I thought we would have a Euro West based in England, but I did not want to do downtown London because of the cost. So we had it up in Birmingham, north of London. And I went over ahead of time and found a Holiday Inn outside of the city that had enough facilities for meals and sleeping accommodations and a meeting room. And if we got the 100 people that I had hoped we would get from Western Europe and the UK to come, we actually booked the entire hotel for the 4 days that we were going to be there. We were going to take over the whole place because it was a smallish hotel. 100 people was as much as they could handle. But in the end, we didn't get that many people to come, so I had to sort of give up rooms. And we only ended up, I think, with 30 or 35 people in the end. But that was somewhat historic in that for the second conference in Washington, we did get Cardinal Cassidy, who was head of the Pontifical Council for Christian Unity, to come and be one of the plenary speakers in Washington. It was a letter from the dean that got his attention. And then as he was retiring from that job in Rome, I invited him to be one of the plenary speakers in London at the Birmingham conference. And he also agreed to come there. And he was very gracious and a real gentleman in that the week before the conference, I wrote to him and said, Your Eminence, we only have 30 people signed up to come. And that's not a whole lot for you to come all the way from Rome and spend 3 days. If you wish to cancel, feel free. And I'll certainly understand that it's not worth your time to come and just meet with 30 people. And he said, oh, no, it's on my calendar. I'm coming.
That's nice.
And I thought that was very gracious of him to make the effort to come for 3 days for just 30 of us.
He came for 1 day for 10 people each day.
Yeah, well, what it did was it really got people's attention that he was there. So the local Archbishop Nichols of Birmingham came for the opening session since there was a cardinal in his turf. And so we got his attention about the whole thing. And of course, Kallistos was there, and they were old friends from the various meetings they'd had over the years. So it turned out to be a really great conference. But again, it had its shaky parts. And we just didn't have enough people turning up. Yeah. And so we didn't do it again there. But Constantinople, we would get 80 or 90. No, we never got that many. Let's see. Yeah, we got about 80, I think, the first year. We had to charter 2 buses to do our side trips. And so we would attach to the conference itself a 1 or 2 day sightseeing trip. 1 year we went to Nicaea. I think the town now is called Iznik, where the 2 ecumenical councils met. We did 1 weekend trip down to the west coast of Turkey and visited Ephesus and all the sites around there. And then another year, we chartered flights and we flew out to the center of Turkey and spent a weekend in Cappadocia. In fact, we stayed in a cave hotel.
A cave hotel? A hotel carved out of rock?
Yes.
Cool.
The Cappadocian landscape is known for its caves and cave churches, and it was where the Christians were able to hide from the Romans when they were being persecuted in the caves. And so they had a hotel set up so we could experience what it was like being in a cave. It was a big tourist trap because they had a cafeteria off to the side of all the rooms that were in the caves that sat like 200 people. And they didn't have a restaurant. They just, it was all cafeteria, buffet style meals. So it was, one of those European kind of vacation places.
Mm.
I do have a funny story about the trip to Cappadocia. If I could
Go for it.
Sort of go off onto this one little thing. While we were there, of course, we were touring various cave churches and seeing the paintings, the icons that were etched in the walls and frescoes that were there. Beautiful, beautiful, because they've been preserved all these centuries. But the one place we visited was also, they had underground cities where they would have thousands of people hiding from the Romans. And they would have escape routes with small tunnels that they would climb through, and then they would drop a stone behind to keep the invaders from coming out. And then they had food supplies and water and everything in huge rooms that they could live and outlast Romans for months and months. Well, as we went down and we're walking from cave to cave through these very, very small tunnels, you had to bend over sort of in half and walk through the tunnel in pretty much pitch black because they only had lights in the rooms, not in the tunnel. And you had to lean over and just look at the ground. You couldn't look up because there was no room, and walk your way through to get to the next room. Well, after the tour back on the bus, I asked Metropolitan Callistos what he thought, and he said, he really enjoyed it. It was his first time there. And he said that in order to make sure that he himself could get through the tunnels, he followed behind Bishop John Michael, because Bishop John Michael had a bit of a larger girth than Metropolitan Callistos. And he said, if Bishop John Michael can get through and not get stuck, then I know I can get through and not get stuck. And if Bishop John Michael gets stuck, then I can still get out the back way.
That's cute. All right. So what are you hoping for with the Orientale Lumen conferences going forward?
Well, I hope we can continue holding them. I think just having them is a bit of an accomplishment, like after 9/11, and recovering from the pandemic and getting back together again. So right now I've got the retreat house in Washington that we usually use booked for the third week of June. I haven't settled on this, but I think the topic is going to be the recent agreed statement of the International Commission that was signed in Alexandria, Egypt, on primacy, because over the years, everyone has said primacy and conciliarity or synodality and the role of the Bishop of Rome in the United Church is the biggest stumbling block. And the International Commission of Theologians, at least, have come to an agreement on that topic. And it's in the Alexandria Agreed Statement. And so I think we should have a conference about that statement and have the experts explain it to the rest of us laity as to what it says, what was agreed, what the work that we have to do yet, which is to, work out the finer details, the devil's in the details. So the principles have been agreed, but how the Pope actually functions and exercises primacy in the universal church is still to be worked out. So I think it will be an interesting conference for us to get an Orthodox perspective and a Roman Catholic perspective of what the Alexandria Statement says, what it means, the implications for it, and what the international dialogue folks think needs to be done. We have two members of the dialogue who have been regular participants in our conference, Archbishop Job of Telmessos. Now he's of Pisidia. He's moved diocese. He's moved from Geneva where he was the ecumenical representative for the Patriarch to the World Council of Churches. He now is the head of a diocese on the south coast of Turkey, but he's still the Orthodox co-chair of the International Catholic Orthodox Dialogue. And Monsignor Paul McPartlin, who is a leading Roman Catholic ecumenist, he's a professor here at Catholic University. And so I'm hoping that he would be able to participate in the conference, and then find some other either members of the International Dialogue or other dialogues and other perspectives to come and have a discussion about the agreed statement of Alexandria, as well as the previous ones that support it, which were in Chieti and Ravenna. So there are three ecumenical agreements about primacy and the levels of primacy and what primacy means. And the last one talks about going forward of what primacy should look like of a future church. So that's my idea for next year. I hope that we'll be able to continue to attract enough people to keep it going. And I look forward to many, many years of Orientale Lumen continuing into the future.
That's good. Well, is there anything more that you'd like to talk about within this?
I just, maybe just to conclude, to wrap up, to mention that the Orientale Lumen conferences have spawned into what's now the Orientale Lumen Foundation, which is a sort of a wider nonprofit organization that has done two additional kinds of activities that I hope also will continue. One is that we sponsored seminary choirs to come to America from Eastern Europe and do concert tours amongst all the Eastern Catholic churches in the past, and we've done three of those. They were both a exchange of seminarians to come and learn more about the American church now that communism is out of the way. And it was a fundraiser. We took donations at the concerts and sent the money back to the seminaries. Of course, that's a little more difficult now. Seminarians from Ukraine are not going to be able to come anytime soon, but maybe from Slovakia, we'll see. The other activity that spawned off of that is ecumenical pilgrimages. We've done 3 or 4 of those. We're a group that we just opened it up to the public, and I put together our itinerary for traveling. The first one we did, about 7-8 years ago with Viking Travel as the organizer of the tour. We went to Rome and Constantinople and had audiences both with Pope Francis and with Patriarch Bartholomew. The second one we did was when there was an attempted coup of the government of Turkey. And so we changed our plans at the last minute and just went to Byzantine Italy, up and down the East Coast from Ravenna to Bari, and then spent a few days doing things in Rome. And the last one was this past July, where we went to Constantinople and the Holy Land and spent 10 days there. We also went to the Holy Land 4 years ago. So we've done several pilgrimages as Orientale Lumen Foundation sponsored events. And the one I have in mind for that for sure is in 2025, so 2 years from now, that we would go to Turkey, Constantinople for sure, and go to Nicaea, because it will be the anniversary of the Council of Nicaea of 325. So it'll be the 1,700th anniversary of the first ecumenical council. And I think there's lots of activities that the churches are planning. So I've got to be careful to figure out what dates to go. But watch this space for more details about a trip to Constantinople, and I think to Rome, because I don't think it's going to be possible to travel to the Holy Land anytime soon, given what's going on right now.
Yes.
So that's what the future holds, and I hope the Orientale Lumen movement as Patriarch Bartholomew actually coined that term, the Orientale Lumen movement, of what we're trying to do of grassroots ecumenical desire, dialogue, and agreement and understanding in order to hopefully have full unity and full communion in the near future.
Yes. All right. Well, then, I think that just about wraps up everything for the day. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to Jack's Corner. Thank you for listening, and have a blessed rest of your day. Bye-bye for now.